Support for the podcast comes from Philadelphia Integrative Psychiatry, a practice in Devon, Pennsylvania that combines multiple psychological and medical disciplines to build a truly holistic, individualized model of comprehensive integrative care. By providing all of their services under one roof, they aim to bridge a gap in mental health treatment. Their marriage between mental health and physical health helps to identify core sources of distress for their patients, be it psychological, medical, or a combination of both. Their team of mental health professionals and nutritionists have varying backgrounds, education, and emphases. They truly have someone for everyone. Learn more at phillyintegrative.com. Yes. Hello and welcome back to Parenting Stuff I Wish I Knew Sooner and Want You to Know Now. I'm your host, Erica Desper, founder of the Center for Confident Parenting and a mom who seems to learn everything I need to know the hard way. My guest today is Bill Reichle. Bill is the owner of Avanti Consulting. Bill consults and works with families, children, and adults with a focus on neurodivergence and the challenges that can bring to the family dynamic. Boy, do we know about that in our house. Bill, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica, and I'm really excited to be here.
Great. So first things first, it's early for me today. I haven't had enough coffee. Tell us a bit about yourself and what brought you to the work that you do, and I'll get my coffee while you do that.
There you go. Good timing. So, hi, everyone. I'm a private practice business owner and a mental health therapist. I grew up in Chester County, graduated from Unionville High School, and I knew from an early age that I was going to help in some way. And I remember when I was paired in second grade with another student who had a disability, and the special education teacher came into the classroom and wanted me to be paired with them as kind of like their buddy and behavioral model. And kind of ever since then, that friendship has blossomed. But also to this day, like I knew I wanted to make an impact. So I would volunteer at different summer camps, some overnight camps for individuals like specifically with ADHD, autism, and knew that's what I loved to do. So I went out west, went to the University of Oregon, where I focused on helping in the daycare settings, in the high school settings with individuals who have ADHD, autism, different learning disabilities, and knew, okay, this is what I wanted to do. So I then thought maybe I would go into special education and become like a special education teacher. But I found the counseling niche and came back home, went to grad school at the University of Pennsylvania, and was able to do this dual track where I could do mental health counseling and school counseling. So I was able to then step into Westchester East High School after graduating. I was a high school counselor there, a boys lacrosse coach there, and it was a time that I really enjoyed, but I also knew I wasn't able to help enough. So I started building my private practice in the background, and it was like, you know what, one summer it was getting too big where I said, I can't go back to the school. I won't be able to do both. So I made the leap. And, I've been able to enjoy building the IEP 504 process for families on the back end now, and trying to really help connect them with the accommodations that they deserve, but maybe they don't know how to navigate and the right questions to ask and who to ask. So I've been able to enjoy that part of the work too.
For real. Wonderful. I don't enjoy that part, but I'm glad you do. That's been my least favorite part of the journey. I'm glad there are people out there willing and able to help with that.
Yes.
Well, that was good to hear I always love to hear the journey. I think a lot of us who are helpers have a similar story. We just want to do more. And I also experienced that sort of, two jobs. Both of them are getting like, I'm not doing either of them well, so I have to take the leave. So that's always exciting to hear. And we're glad that you did. So it's summer as we record this. I think we're halfway through. I personally have a 14-year-old neurodivergent teenager. He would love, of course, to spend the entire summer on his phone, amongst other things, computer, video games, but the phone is the hot one right now. And I know that we're not alone in navigating that battle. So what I'd love for you to help us parents with today is, first of all, understanding why screens have such a draw for kids, and especially neurodivergent kids? And then how can we set limits around them with maybe less power struggles? I would love no power struggles, but maybe that's setting setting the bar too high. Take all that and put it into a question and go with it.
Yeah, no power struggles would be awesome. Yeah, I'm asked a lot about that of, how can we make this painless? And it's sadly it's one of those, there's no one size fits all. It's so unique. But screens are a huge draw because I hear often how it's their escape, it's their lifeline to friends, and how they really want to be able to FaceTime. They want to be able to Snapchat, and like they don't iMessage, they don't text message. It's more of these other types of forms. So there's many times where I assume it's a text, and they're like, "No, this was on Snapchat." I was like, "Okay, that's my fault." So sometimes you show your age there.
Yes, right. You're dating yourself.
So there's that. But really like they're not understanding how addicting the apps are really built, and what they're meant to do, and even trying to get them to understand what a casino means is hard sometimes, but it's truly built in that way. There's different reward circuits that are being triggered for them, whether it's the ding, whether it's something that's unlocked, whether they have to keep signing in to get more points. So there's this big draw that they like the feeling of the dopamine hitting. There's also this side where, well, there's usually a couple of their buddies that's somehow able to play a little bit longer than they are.
Yeah.
And this is when the whole argument kind of gets, spun around because they don't want to be left out. They may feel like this is their only time to play with their friends. And then we go back and forth in this kind of, argument. And
Yeah.
really what I've started to notice is that, yes, it takes that one friend to play a little longer to make it harder. But when you start to then have maybe that one friend over, it's a way to kind of allow the script to be turned around, because rather than it's like, well, I have to be on this, it's like, well, let's have Johnny over, and let's have them over at a different hour where it's not into 10 p.m., but maybe it's to 4 p.m., 5 p.m. They get some time to
Right.
play. There's not the pull then that they're missing out later. Um, there's also this kind of piece where I've noticed kids start to say like, well, I like being on there because I can kind of create my world. And they like being able to like have things that they can control. They understand, they know how to code it, they know how to develop it. So they really like being able to kind of sit there and have full control when maybe in their world outside of that, they don't feel like they have too much control. So to like take that away, then you're basically bringing them back to a place where there's no control. And that's really difficult. You have then also this huge piece with, a lot of the different neurodivergent related disabilities that like time management is really hard, and
Or non-existent.
or non-existent. Exactly. So hours go by and it's like, Mom, I just got on 5 minutes ago. It's like, try 5 hours.
Yeah.
And they don't recognize that. So being able to like help them understand how much they're sucked into something, and being able to like, what I like to do is draw up screen time on like one of the kids' phone. I'll have them pull it up and kind of look at the different hours that they use on apps. And I'll sit there and I'll calculate, and I'll say, look, in 1 month on Brawl Stars, for example, one kid ended up having 25 plus hours in 1 month to a game. And I was like, dude, that's over a day. I was like, we think the summer flies by. You're going to be in school in a month. And don't you want a
Right.
summer day back in your pocket? And they always say
Right.
yes. Well, there it went. So getting kind of the attachment to like, yes, you can have fun, you can connect with your friends, but there's other ways to do it. And we're also giving away more hours when you're kind of playing alone. So that's something that like getting them to understand the many different difficulties, the many different layers to it allows this conversation to be a lot easier. But to your first point, it will never be painless. There's always going to be a hard transition.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really helpful from the parent side of it, because we don't see all of what you just described, right? All the internal, like, I'll be left out and, this and that. We just see, like, for real, dude, it's been 5 hours. How did you think it was 5 minutes? And why are you so addicted to this thing, right?
Exactly.
So I think, yes, those conversations are easier. Power struggles are less likely if we're kind of on the same side of the issue versus, our kid may not let go of the power struggle, but we can try to bring these things in so that we put ourselves on the same side of the debate.
Right, right. Because then you get to say like, okay, let's have them over. Let's go out and do this. Let's
Yeah.
let's go even go to an arcade if you really want to. Where it's like you can still have that time, but you're showing that, yeah, like you said, you heard them, you're on their side, but it's also a little more, you know, um, set up to have a schedule around it naturally, rather than like, yep, go to the basement, go to your room, talk to you at dinner.
Yep. And I have often been heard to lament to anyone who will listen, like, oh, I wish I had the opportunity to raise my kid, before the time of these screens, because I'm sure
Yes,
our parents dealt with a lot, but they didn't deal with, with this technology piece.
correct.
But you, in our notes before the show, you made a good point that this debate of like, but Johnny is allowed to whatever. That is
Yes,
really a new debate. It's
yes,
around a new topic, but you were saying it's like the same as like candy in the checkout line, or how late we're allowed to stay up, or so
yes,
this is a parenting theme that's sort of constant of like, why can't I do whatever the same amount or whatever everybody else is doing?
it
Yeah,
is.
it's really a new problem.
No, I mean, we're just going to interchange essentially whatever we're arguing about. And, 10 years from now, whenever somebody stumbles upon this and listens to it again, it's going to be no longer
Right.
Brawl Stars, but it will be a new app. It will no longer
Right.
be
I actually feel really old because I don't even know what game you're referring to, but that's okay.
the most common one I'm hearing right now. It's the one that seems to suck them in the most right now.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll probably be hearing about that soon. Um, I also think it's helpful for parents to be reminded that there are some benefits, if I want to use that word loosely, of like, some of these kids are creating and doing their
Yes,
form of socializing that they're comfortable accessing. So like it's not like it's all bad. It's more about the time blindness and being overly
exactly.
consumed. And then I assume, or I've heard from other experts, that when you get these constant quick dopamine hits, and you're a kid who already struggles with non-preferred tasks, then when you try to rejoin the normal world and
Yes,
you have to do something where you aren't getting that, it just seems like such a downgrade.
big time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely tough.
it's hard to then feel like, okay, I want to go back to this now. It's like, no, I felt more appreciated here, more celebrated here.
Right. And it turns non-preferred into whatever would be less less than that. So as parents, we want to remember, it sounds like there's this social connection piece, there's this issue of peers being able to seemingly play without any limits.
Yes,
Um, the black and white model of the games and apps that can be followed, the time
right.
blindness or difficulty managing time, uh, and the appeal of like, oh, this is going to be my job in the future, right? I know that's an argument they throw out, which may turn out to be true.
Yes, yes. Being a YouTuber, being a developer, is one of
Yes.
those. It's catching on like wildfire. And I mean,
Yeah.
like you hinted towards earlier too. Like, yeah, there are some positives. It's within these parameters. Like there's one case where, I used an individual's ability to develop games and had them develop a game about like the good and the bad essentially of screen time. And it was this kind of like, okay, you're going to go into Roblox and you're going to create a game and talk about kind of like how this character gets rewarded for like less screen time, but you can also then create the version of the game where they get rewarded for more screen time. And I was trying to paint this picture for them of like, okay, let's lean on a strength of yours. Let's lean on something you like to do, but let's also get you to see the other side, because that was an easier sell than me just sitting here spitting out a bunch of facts to them.
Right, 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 right. I think also like, so I'm turning whatever I'm turning this summer, 46. So I grew up on like Mario, right? You start at the beginning of a level, you move from left to right with a very clear goal, and then the level ends, and that's a good pausing point if you need to go eat dinner or like answer the phone or whatever.
Yes.
But games now, like what a disaster for neurodivergent kids that don't manage
Yes.
time well, and for parents trying to set limits, because there's no pause, there's no
No.
end unless you finish the game, but that could take days, weeks, who in the world knows?
Exactly.
That's really, really challenging. I almost miss the time of like start, do it, complete it, move on. It's tough.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. There aren't those easy check boxes anymore, and sometimes, even the games that will have a natural ending to a level, the new argument now seems to be, well, it won't let me save until I get to that end point. And it's like,
Yes.
that used to be okay. We used to be like, well, I
Right.
guess I'll restart it tomorrow or
No.
whenever.
Now you lose all your, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
and same with scrolling. There's no, my son will be like, yeah, I just have to finish this. And I'm like, but there's no finish with scrolling. Like it's an endless, you have to just decide,
Yes.
or this is what I'm saying, that it's like, it's time to stop for now and we'll be back later because it just goes on. I mean, I even get sucked into it sometimes in that, but I have the self-awareness to go, wait, what am I doing? I hate it here. Let me get out of here. I'm,
Exactly. Yep. You sometimes are like, all right, I need to swipe up out of this. But then a couple
yes,
minutes
yes.
later, somehow your fingers end up clicking it again. It's like, oh man, it
Exactly.
got me.
Exactly. All right. So we've looked at the parent side of it. I just want to spend a minute looking at the data side of it. This might not matter to everybody, but I know some parents are very data oriented. So I did look it up because I don't know it off the top of my head, but current data tells us that the average teen spends nearly 5 hours a day on social media apps. That makes me like, oh, but have I ever really tracked or looked at my son's logs? No. And current data tells us that even 3 hours a day on social media doubles a teen's risk of depression. So pretty significant. Those stats come from a Gallup poll, as well as a 2019, which, mind you, pre-COVID American Medical Association study of over 6,000 American adolescents. I can only imagine that once we were all stuck home quarantining, everything were, all the numbers we talked about increased. But this survey collected data from over 6,000 parents and over 1,500 adolescents who were the children of those parents. They asked about a bunch of things in terms of daily life. And this survey happened because academic scholars were concerned about how habit forming, media was, and overconsumption. So for the parent who's hearing that stat of, 5 hours a day is the average and three can have a significant impact on mental health and maybe is beginning to freak out, how can you frame that data so we can use it productively instead of in a panicky, guilty way?
I mean, it is alarming, it is sad and it is really frustrating. And, that data clearly shows, what Steve Jobs and Bill Gates knew with their kids, that they
Right?
weren't going to have their kids in front of screens. Like they purposely made sure that, yes, their kids went to private school, but they went to private schools that like didn't use technology in those ways because they understood the impacts of it. And we're now seeing kind of the proof in the pudding that yes, social media is allowing kids to compare themselves. It's allowing them to feel left out. It's allowing them to, look for things that they think they want and to go chase, whether it's, another item to go buy in a game. They think
Oh,
that, yeah, there's always
another
one more
modern thing I can't stand.
item, right? And they see it, and what is then Googled on their device or what is then said near their device will start to then also show up in their feed. So then you also
Mhm.
have like this very targeted ad towards them, and really it's like we used to hate going to websites and having ads pop up around us. And really what social media has become is like your ability to just go scroll through ads, but we don't really see it that way. If we had pop-up blocker for social media, you wouldn't have anything on there.
Right.
So, we've kind of fallen into this trap where we're getting targeted by ads essentially. It doesn't leave us feeling like we're doing anything right. It makes us continuing to chase things that we don't have. And that's where the depression kicks in. You see maybe other kids that you look up to in the school building that are popular that are going out and doing things you weren't invited to. You have people that you thought were friends that are out doing things that you weren't invited to. You have the newest item being flaunted in front of you that somebody got that you don't have. And rarely is it a way for kids to connect in a good way. So, it makes sense. And this is where the screen time around social media, putting the limits, or even just not allowing them to have it to begin with, or having those discussions, um, is critical because we see it, we know it. I think we're in this early age of, okay, now what do we do? I think it used to be kind of an unlimited playground before, and now we're starting to realize like, oh crap, we should probably scale this back. How do we do that? And I think that's where this data is going to help drive that conversation.
Yes, for sure. And there are times when I say, like, I wish I didn't even let him have this in the first place. I'm not sure that's a realistic limit or we're spending my time on that. Limits would be the compromise, right?
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah. All right. So we did kind of touch on this, but I just want to make sure you get to say everything you wanted to say. So we know why they're so drawn to it. What about digital media, social media makes it so hard for, neurotypical kids, humans, adults, but especially neurodivergent kids to disconnect when we, like, let's say we've set limits and we are going to talk about how to do that. And we're like, okay, Bobby, it's time to get off. That's where the real struggle comes from, even if they knew it was coming. So what makes the disengagement so hard?
Yeah, so I mean, a big reason is it's so easy to connect to and it's really easy to manipulate. The fine motor skills that are needed and the patience that's needed back when computers needed a mouse, right? Or there's dial-up internet, that's no longer needed. Like iPads with 5G, you can be anywhere. You don't have to be home on Wi-Fi. You're quickly tapping things with your pointer fingers. And this is great when it's used in an assistive technology standpoint. It's awesome that now more kids are able to access their education and access help and communicate. And, that's fantastic, but the unintended consequence comes when then kids start to, who don't need it from an assistive technology standpoint, use it to go play games, use it to go get lost, use it to basically be in the car and just stare at the screen. And, another complaint that I've heard from parents is that some kids will start to watch, like when there's a screen time set, they'll watch what their parents are typing on the screen and try to mimic the same touch points to then add in the password to then allow them more screen time. So kids are starting to realize, okay, I can still play if I just follow how this password is typed or tapped.
Mm,
And that used to not really be a thing before where, you needed to watch your parent type in something to get something. But now
right.
kids feel like they can go access that secret password really easily. And they've found many ways to also just get around it. I mean, there's kids that are out there, if it's on a computer and you have screen time, just a heads up to parents, like kids find ways to delete the
So
app.
we're creating a culture of hackers.
Correct. Correct.
Great.
I mean, I hope it's used for good one day.
I
Um,
hope so.
but yeah, you have kids that are now finding new ways where like they'll then share it at school. Like I hear a lot from kids on the back end of like, yeah, I know how to get around that at school. You just do this, this, and this. I know how to get around it at home. Like one of the big ones now on Microsoft computers is like kids know if they have the screen time limit, if they delete the app and then reinstall the app, it will sometimes bypass that screen time limit. So they reset their 5 hours or whatever the limit was. Hopefully it wasn't that. But they're
Right.
finding new ways. And it's like, then they share it with each other.
Yeah. Wow. All right. We haven't hit that yet. I'm glad. Thank you for cluing me in.
Yes. So just a heads up on that one. That is a big issue. So, what makes it really hard then to disconnect, to bring it back is just that it's easy to get lost into it. It's easy to find one more way to get the hours they need, so they don't need the patience.
Yeah.
They don't need a bunch of clunky wires and devices to go access it. It's easy. They turn on the screen, they're off to the races, and why would they need to disconnect? Why would they need to step away? It's all right there.
Yeah, definitely. So this is not a question I prepped you for, but I'm sure you can handle it. If a parent is listening and saying like, well, my kid's 14, for example, I feel like with some things at this point, I can expect him or work with him toward like, hold yourself accountable, set your
Right.
own, limits. Is that ever a reasonable expectation? Let's say we're talking about the neurodivergent. Is it a reasonable expectation for any kid at a certain age? And then I guess the neurodivergent question is separate, or is it really on us, at least at first, to set those and hold those? Is it
Yeah,
even something they can do, I guess, is what I'm asking.
they can in the late middle school to high school range. But
Okay.
the early elementary, even up through sixth, seventh, depending on the development of the child, yeah, the boundaries need to be set, and they need to be firm, even if that means, yes, 3 to 4 nights of kicking and screaming. What we don't want to do is let the rails go wider and let them control things, because that's when it then turns into like 10th and 11th grade, trying to rail them back in, and or reel them back in. um, but what I've noticed is like seventh and eighth graders will start to see that, okay, I can spend a little less time here because I want to go do this with my friends. Or they're starting to think about high school or maybe even college, and they want to think about like, well, like I actually want to start studying this more, start looking into this more. So I think that's where kind of the turning it into like post middle school, post high school conversation starts to help,
Okay.
because a lot of parents will start to say, if I called my boss up today and said I can't come in, I need to finish this level. Do you think that would work? Right?
Right.
And that's the type of response they would get on the other line. They would get a laugh, right? It would be
Right.
ridiculous. So
Right.
starting to get kids to buy into this longer term discussion,
Yeah.
has started to allow them to shift. I've seen that
Yeah.
to be the most successful approach.
Well, and again, it's not like because I said so and we're on opposite sides. It's like, hey, let me come over here. It's my job
Yes,
to get you ready for the future and to be independent of me. It's not going to affect me in the future. It's just going to affect you. And it kind of puts us on that same side, which is great. So it
exactly.
is on us to set the boundaries, at least
Yes.
at first. Um, Now I want to ask, why is that so hard for us? And I think you kind of just answered this question. I think a lot of parents, we know the need for
Yeah.
boundaries and we know it's part of our gig. But then
Yes.
the meltdowns, or whatever word we want to substitute for meltdowns, the repercussions when we
Yeah.
hold a limit like that are just so great. A lot of people have other kids and jobs, and you're just like, fine, just go. I can't. I can't. So that's an
No,
obvious one, but let me frame that question for you to answer. Why is it often so hard to set and hold boundaries? Period. But you can answer specifically to digital and social media.
like you were saying, the idea of wanting to give 10 more minutes after a long workday yourself is
Yes.
sometimes hard to fathom. And, really what I start to try to sell to parents is that, like, I understand it might be 10 hard minutes now, but that's going to turn into 30 harder minutes down the road,
Yeah.
which will then turn into an hour. And like it's going to be really hard the longer we let this go. And so sometimes it's also working with the parents. I'll have the kids step out, and the parents and I will talk, and it will be developing like, okay, how are you getting your self-care, how are you helping yourself, so that way you can give the 10 more minutes that's needed now, knowing that the payoff will be worth it. So it almost goes back to this delayed gratification of like, we're trying to instill that in our kids, yet it's sometimes hard for us to model ourselves. And, that's really where it's like, yes, we can help our kids, but it really does take all of us to then find ways to like say, okay, I can give 10 more minutes here to sit with them
Hmm.
as they're crying and be like, buddy, I love you. I know this is hard. I know you can't wait to play it. And I can't wait for you to get to the level 2. And, tell me about it tomorrow, though. I'm really looking forward to hearing, like, how do you get it done? How'd you do it? What'd you
Hmm.
have to overcome this time? Was the boss harder than it was, the first time? And letting them almost like see that you care about the level, even though you might know about 40% of the words they throw at you, still goes a long way.
It's probably generous. Depends on the game.
Maybe 10%, yes.
And can you, as a parent, I always find it helpful to have like a script or a scenario and then kind of relate it to myself. So, can you give an example? How would you help a kiddo see, like, let's say they're on Snapchat for 2 hours a day, Brawl Stars for 4 hours a day?
Yeah.
How can we look at that and say, like, let's do this instead without just maybe completely taking it away, which I'm sure is also an option, but we'll have a bigger response from our child.
Yes. Yeah. So this is from a recent conversation with a kid where, um, we had them pull up their data from the previous week, and we looked at all the different apps, and we looked at their top 2 apps, which in this case, yes, were Snapchat and Brawl Stars. And we then said, okay, let's total up these hours. And then we had them kind of look at like, okay, if we multiply this over how many weeks, either in the summer or in a month, how many days would we have really spent on these apps? And then from there, it's like, okay, if we then reverse engineer this and
Mhm.
divide back among those days or those weeks or those months, how many hours would you want to have spent?
Mm.
And trying to get them to see, like, is it actually more or less than where they were? Because sometimes they'll go under and they'll say, you know what, I only want to spend 2 hours. It's like, well, if we look at the numbers, you were actually averaging 4. And
Mhm.
then saying, okay, you have the availability to set a limit on yourself, not just mom and dad. I know
Mhm.
you may not want to click that button, but if you could, what would you set the limit for? And then they might say 3 hours. Okay. So if we set it to 3 hours, that's still one less than where they were before at 4. So we started to have them work towards it. The
Mm.
other part to this is, in Brawl Stars in particular, they can do it on their own or they can be with their buddies right next to them, but they're all on their own device playing in a game together.
Mm.
And then it's like, okay, do you want to save
Favorite.
your hours for when you're with your buddies?
Mhm.
Or do you want to just use it on your own, but if you're with your buddies, you can't join them? So now you start to kind of paint this picture of like, you already lowered your hours to 3. Thank you. We'll work on getting it to 2 next week. But here you are now having more control over those hours. You get to determine how you use them. But if your buddies are playing and you can't join, that's going to stink. So you're getting them to plan out more of their day, more of their routine, and how they want to use their hours.
Yeah. And is it fair to say if we're working back from extended use like this, like personally, I found that my kid needs to be reminded and visually for him of like, what did I do before I started? Like he doesn't even remember. Then you get the like, I'm bored, right?
Yeah.
You want to strangle him. So
Eh,
we have like, not the same thing works for everyone, but we have limits. And when that time is up, he has cards that he can pick from that we brainstorm together at the beginning of the
yes.
summer of like, well, I have to do my 20 minutes of summer reading. And then he has like stretches he has to do for physical therapy. So like those kind of tasks, but also fun stuff like, hey, I like to shoot hoops for a while, so I can go do that. Or because he really can't pull,
Yes.
he's just not there with the executive function. He literally forgets what he likes to go do.
Yeah,
uh,
you're right. Like a menu is needed. This idea of like,
right,
what can I do? Yeah,
right.
is you're spot on. Like it's something that it's really hard to retrieve and recreate
Right.
because
Plus,
it's
in
almost,
scaffolding, I don't say
yes,
like go do X. I say like, well, what do you have that you can use when you're not sure, what to go do?
exactly.
So that's been helpful. It's not working perfectly, I'm not going to lie, but it's been helpful for us.
But you're not expecting everything to work 100% of the time, but
Right,
you just need it to work a time to then build from there. And
right.
whenever there's the I'm bored, one of my favorite things to say in those moments is like, well, boredom is good. I
Yeah,
like being bored.
right.
You
Well,
want to
great.
be
Then
bored.
there's opportunity for you to be creative.
Well, exactly. Because then I'll take them down the rabbit hole of like, let's think about the times that you are bored. What does your
Mhm.
mind end up doing?
Yeah.
And they start to
And we
realize,
also try to build in a screen activity on those cards that is just a little more productive. Like he's in a little coding program right now. So
yes.
it feels kind of school-ish to him
Hmm.
at the moment, but I feel like there's just more benefit to it than just scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. So that can sometimes help with the transition problem of like, it's so hard to leave the screens. It's like, okay, it's
Yes,
time to put the phone away. But you can be on you can just transition to this screen and then, maybe away from screens.
exactly.
Um, okay, awesome. So the elephant in the room, according to another study, one of the biggest predictors of adolescent screen time is their parents' screen use. So the study author said it's especially important that parents follow their own rules, practice what they preach, because even if they think their kids aren't watching them, they really are. And this might be even a harder pill to swallow than the ones we've done so far. So how would you respond to that data from what you're seeing?
Yeah, it is hard because I know the job of a parent is very multifaceted and there's never enough hours in the day and like I know that it is a really hard job and the other side to this though is like yes, parents do have a role in this and as much as we want to just look at the kids, like we do have to look at ourselves and that is difficult because again, not enough hours in the day. But the most overwhelming argument is from kids is that, like, well, my parents are on it. They're, Dad, you're actually even on it more, and it is awkward when the parents do then pull out their screen time and kids want to compare and the parents win. Like that
And
is
a lot of
really,
times we're like, but I'm working.
that
That
is,
doesn't matter from the kid's perspective, right?
because they'll be like, well, I'm working on
Right.
beating this level. It's like,
It's all equally important.
it is. That's their job. But the other part to this that I bring back for kids is like, sure, we can put the argument piece, I'll equal that one out. If we want to, let's negate that one. But what is truly different is there is a fully developed brain on one side of the couch, but not on the other side of the couch. There's a brain that has more self-control and a brain that doesn't have self-control.
Right. The
So,
same reason you don't like vote yet or get to drink or drive.
right, it's like, well, my dad drives. It's like, that's fantastic, but you
Right.
can't drive.
Right.
But for some reason we lose that kind of, I guess, rationality when it comes to screen time.
Right.
So really one of the biggest ways, and it's something that, is a theme you keep talking about, of like being on the same side and letting them know that we're on the same team, is then saying, buddy, you're right. Like I should put the phone down more, and joining in that and saying like, okay, like how long do you think I should put down the phone?
Mm.
And it's fascinating. You'll hear kids throw out a really large number. And then when we flip this back to them, well, okay, so if I'm putting it away for 5 hours, how long are you going to put it away?
Right.
And they're like, well, maybe 5 minutes. And it's like, if this is going to be a deal, let's make it even. And then you'll see their number increase, but not too much, and your number decrease to a point where it's like, okay, let's agree on half an hour. And if we can at least start there, we know where that will lead.
Yeah. And that's been really helpful for us personally too, is we started with like, okay, if you want 20 minutes of your phone, give me 20 minutes of one of these, things from the menu.
Yep.
But we've been slowly able to sort of like, now we've worked to a point where he can put the phone away for 3 hours and work on the menu, and he doesn't feel that like withdrawal.
Exactly.
That was so intense at first. So I would say to parents, like, yes, I like what you're saying about like, let's work toward it,
Yes.
not necessarily do a full break. Which brings me to my next question. I know the answer is going to be like, it depends. There's no one size fits all. But generally speaking, what do realistic and reasonable boundaries look like from the perspective of a mental health care provider? And my sort of sub question is a full detox truly needed, or just some clear limits, or is it just so situational that you can't say?
Yeah, so one thing that I've found really helpful is like when there's this access to screen time in the morning, and it's, for example, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. You get your 2 hour block, you'll wake up, you'll have breakfast, and then from there, go enjoy your screen time. But at 12, we're going to come back down, we're going to have lunch. And then from there, there's some activities in the afternoon from a menu, from things that like either they're going to go to the pool, they're going to have a friend over, we're going to go ride bikes, we're going to go grocery shopping with mom or dad, just things that will change up their mindset. What happens then is that the day flies by more quickly. They don't realize that that afternoon, maybe 3 hours went by with no screen time. And then come nighttime, it might be like, okay, let's go watch a movie. Let's go have a friend over, and go to the movies. But you're still kind of like giving them a little bit of that screen time, but they don't really know it, but it also scratches the itch that's kind of underlying. And before you know it, they're ready for bed. They're not really asking for it as much because they got their fix, for a lack of better words, earlier in the day. And that seems to set things up way better. So, like, one thing that some families have started to do is kind of like say, let's look at a week and let's look at each day then within the week. And let's kind of give you a plan. And let's give you some options of like, here are your 5 puzzle pieces in that day. How do you want them to fit? And if you show them that, like, hey, if we put the screen time actually up in the morning here, you're going to have more hours to play than if we put it later in the day, because you know what, we're going to have to go pick up your sister from dance, or we're going to have to go pick up your brother from camp. And before they know it, they're like, okay, I could have 2 hours in the morning or maybe 30 minutes in the afternoon. And they feel like they're in control. They feel like they're getting a good deal. And
Choice.
exactly. And you're getting more time with them off the screen.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
will often say, like, in 20 minutes, we're going to hop in the car for 20 minutes or whatever those numbers are. Like, you can either have it now, but then we're not going to bring it, or you can get off it now and then you can have it for the car. But that's giving him,
exactly.
again, it puts us on the same side because you're not dictating. And we know a lot of our kids have trouble with oppositional
Yeah, exactly.
reactions to demands or whatever
Yes.
words we want to use. I know the language is changing.
No.
So
Yep.
we don't want to maybe frame it as a demand, but as a choice. And then also that's moving them toward thinking this through for themselves down the road, right? It's more
Exactly.
scaffolded than just a directive.
Yeah, because I mean, you try this. Like when you say to your kid, like, "I want you to have screen time," they're gonna look at you confused. Like they're not used to ever hearing that.
Right.
But when you say it from the standpoint of like, "Yeah, I want you to have screen time, and I also want you to have these other things in your day. So how should it work?" They're gonna solve their problem more quickly than, like you said, a demand being placed on them.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's some kind of Jedi mind trick to it of letting them
Right.
feel in control. It goes a long way.
Yeah. Okay, so to wrap that question up, in most cases, if it's not a what feels like a severe situation, it's
Right.
just sort of a reset of like, hey, we're going to have limits and here's the framework for
Yeah.
that. In some cases, a full detox might be necessary, and just to define that, it might be like a period of days where we're just
Yeah.
eliminating screens or the problematic version of a screen.
Yeah, and
Um,
there's even then digital detox programs that, kids can go
okay.
to, where it's you're staying at a facility, that is basically for weeks, months, depending on what
Okay.
the need or the want is. And yeah, you're actually learning how to like put a phone away. And like if it's to that point, like there's obviously those programs out there. But I really like to try to find ways to make it happen in the home because I feel like sure they can go do it there, but like when you get back home, then you just fall back into the same pattern.
Sure, sure. All
So
right. So let's say a parent is listening and going, "Uh-oh, I really need to like we need to work on this." How can they, let's say they've already worked it out in their own mind, but now they need to present it to their child, young adult, whatever, like, "Hey, this is something we need to be doing and we're going to do." How do they frame that conversation without it like immediately turning adversarial, contentious?
so I really try to bring, humor or kind of a lighthearted, approach into this. And with kids that are super resistant, one of the first things I'll kind of joke about is like, buddy, if you ate 45 pounds of carrots today for dinner, would that be good for you or bad for you? Right? And
Which
they
would
would,
never happen, but yeah.
which would never happen, right? And it shouldn't because
Can
the
barely get him to eat 4 or 5 carrots.
right? But like it's good that he's not going to eat 45 pounds because the answer is
Right.
that's actually bad for you.
Yeah.
And kids are like, what? But they're carrots. It's like, yeah, but too much of anything is
Right.
bad for you.
Even
Right. And
really good
and
things.
we
Yeah.
know that like, okay, carrots has a higher ceiling than screen time. Right. You can have more carrots and it'd be good for you than use screen time and be good for you. But you start to bring in this idea of like, we're not just saying, oh, only screen time. We're talking about everything. Like, let's talk about moderation across the board.
Yeah.
Because the other part to this is like now there's more school districts talking about how there's going to be moderation brought artificially to the school days, where like they're going to have places to put your phone. You're going to have to turn your phone in, and like some schools are really saying like, hey, we're going to actually start giving out detentions this year for having your phones on you, where before it was just like, hey, man, put that away.
Right.
So framing this like we need to talk about moderation, we need to talk about self control, but we also need to talk about like I don't want you to get in trouble at school.
Mm.
So like if we need to work on this at home, then we're going to work on this at home because if you're getting in trouble at school, then like now the phone's really going to be gone from school and home. So I think
Yep.
your best option is let's work on it from home versus losing both.
And I've been trying to tie it to something that he might look forward to, like, hey, dude, in a couple of years, you're going to be learning to drive, and I'm going to have to feel comfortable letting you go do that. But from what I see right now, I'm really worried that you're going to feel this burning need to, like, I just got to check my notifications, right? And that
Yeah.
might delay your privilege of driving. So, like, let's work on it now so I can see that you have that self control. Because
Yes.
then it's not about, again, me and I said so. It's like, I want you to be able to do this thing that you want to go do.
It's a really good point because you're right. Like once that kind of light turns on of like, oh wait, I will want to do that. Then there's that excitement of like, Mom, I got off right away when you asked me. You know,
Right. Yeah.
so that's a really good point.
Yeah. Okay, so if a parent feels the need to implement a digital detox for their child or their whole family, where would they start and how might they handle these potential meltdowns, for lack of a better word, that they may have to get through at first? And I just want to stress that you would have parents be mentally prepared that at
Yeah.
first their child of any age probably is going to pull out age appropriate
Yes.
stops to try to get them to see like it would just be easier if we didn't do this. Right? Can I get you to change your mind? There's like a 2-year-old version of that, and then probably a 12 and a 16, all of it.
Right. No, exactly. And so really the biggest thing is letting families like start this over family dinner. Letting this
Okay.
be a quick, easy entry point of here's time where like, yes, mom and dad are putting their phones away. Because they might be used to mom and dad sending a quick text or trying to answer a quick phone call while, the pasta's still being finished cooking on the stove. But letting kids know that like, no, this is our time. You're right. And then starting to throw out these like bigger ideas where you're trying to draw on their imagination because kids will get lost in their imagination. They'll want to think of something, they'll want to find something super fascinating to talk about, and you'll know your kid's preferred interest.
Oh,
So if,
yes.
if you're right, so if your kid, is like really super into cars, right? It's like, dude, what do you think about this car that just came out? How would you change it? What do you think would be a cool color for it that's not currently out there? Or, talking about something that maybe is in a show, like how do you think the next episode's going to go, right? And letting them just kind of sit there and talk about, because if they ramble for 20 minutes, that's far better than them sitting there and be like, can I use my phone? Can I use my phone? Can I use it now? Even if some of it you've heard before, we want to set the stage for, hey, we're going to talk about things. You're going to realize that, wow, I didn't have my phone for 30 minutes now. Congratulations, dude. You made it. Nice job. We're going to do it again tomorrow. Then you're building momentum. So show them that the phones are away. Ask them these broad questions where their imagination can run wild. Let it be preferred. So that way they start to buy in, and then they're going to look forward to these moments. They might even want to keep talking to you as you're cleaning up. That's fine.
And that's another thing we've been doing is checking in like, whoa, you know, we did even 10 minutes more than we had planned because we were
Yes,
busy. Like, how was that as hard as you expected it to be? Because the reality often doesn't meet the expectation. And he'll go, same with
exactly.
summer reading. Like, you have to get through 10 pages a day to make sure you're done, by the time school is back in session. But sometimes he'll be like, oh, well, I read 20 pages because I was really into it. Right. And like him noticing that is really helpful for the future. It's not such a chore.
It is. It is. And there was this new study that just recently came out from the University of California that talked about 85% of our worries from this study they found ended up not being true. And being able to kind of tie this back to the kids of like they're worried
Hmm.
about X, Y, and Z happening, there's a great chance that those things won't actually come to fruition.
Right.
So like you're then noticing 10 minutes past what they thought went by, and they didn't, start to have any sort of negative reactions. Their iPad didn't blow up in their hands. Their friends didn't say we're no longer friends. Like all these negative things that people worry about didn't actually happen. And those 10 minutes were actually pretty nice.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
it's a
Right.
really good point.
Awesome. And then, so getting their creative juices flowing for sure. As for
Yeah.
the meltdowns,
Yeah.
let's say we've done this all perfectly and we were so excited that it was going to go, I always have these visions of
Right.
how it's going to go, and it often doesn't match, and I'm disappointed. So part of it is just being mentally prepared. What can we remind kids of when they're really reacting to this change, which they will do?
Yeah. Well, I think, making sure that your thick skin is ready, making sure that, whatever's going to be lashed out at you is coming from a part of frustration and hurt. So being able to come in calmer than how they're reacting, being able to side with them, like, I know that really stinks, bud. Like, I'm right there with you too, man. Like, if I could watch another 2 episodes tonight and that didn't cut into my sleep, like, I wish I could do that too. Like, I really do. and being able to show them like how you have the same draws to things, but you
Yep.
have to have the same self-control that you're trying to get them to build. They can start to then see that. And then the hope is they'll start to then bring it up to you and be like, Dad, I bet you want to watch one more episode, huh? You're like, I know, bud, I do, but it,
Right.
it is time for bed.
And we're being careful. They may perceive this as a punishment,
Right.
but we're being careful to say, like, this is a family effort, lifestyle
Yes.
change for these very good reasons. Same reason I wouldn't, pile broccoli on your plate for dinner. It's the same moderation that we're having everywhere. And I, as a parent, I like to apologize or make it sound
Yes.
like I did something wrong. Like, dude, I didn't even realize how far this has gone and how impactful it can be. And now I know more. And so we have to make this change. And
Right.
because again, I think it puts you kind of on the same team.
It really does. Yeah, it allows them to see that you're human and that,
Yeah.
we're all going to make a mistake. We're all going to get too involved into something that, then we have to learn how to scale back. And, so it's a really good point to just kind of make it like there's no manual. We're all trying to learn. There's no manual on how to be a kid either, just like there isn't to be a parent.
Right.
And, we're trying our best. I know you're trying your best, and we're working on the compromise side of things and, allowing them to see how different compromises have come up over time in their life, of like, well, remember, dude, when last week you wanted that larger size of Rita's and, we actually got the smaller size and you were thankful because your stomach didn't hurt as much than it did
Right.
the previous time, so being able to let them be like, oh, that's right, and then buy into it is huge.
Yeah. Awesome. One more unplanned question that
Yeah,
hopefully you can field.
of course.
Um, you mentioned about passwords and setting parental limits and how kids
Yeah.
can kind of get around that. So I'll tell you what we've been doing, and you
Yeah.
can honestly say, like, good, bad, neutral.
No problem.
We are at the phase where he really is not yet able to say, like, okay, I'm going to put this down and I'm going to step away. Like, even to his own admission, if it's accessible, he's going to go, oh, I just want to check if somebody answered me. And so during this block of time where he isn't supposed to be on it, he's probably going to at least pick it up and look at it and, put it back down, which I think makes him it's hard for him to focus on his whatever fun he's supposed to go be doing, because it's like he knows it's an option, right?
Right.
So my reflex initially was to just, okay, hand it over to me. I'll put it somewhere, you won't know where it is. But I realized from speaking with all these experts that that's totally me controlling it. That's not going to help really him build self-control, right? So we're trying to move away from that.
Right.
So then I moved toward, like, you can either put it away yourself or I will have to,
Right.
do it for you. And to help him with that, I did get one of those lock boxes. But he's kind of in charge of it. So I'm not taking it from him and locking it up, because that does feel like a punishment. I'm more saying, hi, doggy. You could probably hear my cats in the background too. It's all good. I'm more saying, hey, we pre-decided you're going to put it away for this set amount of time. So go do that and, lock it up yourself so you're not tempted. Is that okay? Is it helpful? Is it frowned upon? It's working for us. So I guess the answer would be it's okay.
Yeah.
Is that setting him up for the future, I guess, is what I want to know? Or am I just doing another version of, like, I'm in control of it?
No, I think what some people have really found helpful is that, when you kind of set up this lockbox idea, being able to also attach it to like, hey, I would love to be able to help you earn towards something, and being able to say like, what's something that you're really looking forward to, and every time you're able to successfully do this on your own, it might be extra $5 into that, piggy bank savings account, whatever you want to go. But every time that like I have to do it, it might only be $1, right? And
Mm,
finding a way to like have them save towards something, like then teaches them the self-control. You start to
right.
bring in the financial literacy aspect of like how to
Nice.
save, and then from there you're like helping them think about long term. Hey, I could start to trade in early, or I could have that long term gratification and get something that way. So I found like that, but extra, and
Yep.
having them think about the financial side of things, or if they
Yeah.
want that new
We
game
can
is
add that
huge.
piece because he's always begging for money.
Right, exactly. So I know that's the big elephant in the room too.
Absolutely. What's your dog's name? Or do you have more than one?
His name is Toby. So right now
Toby.
it looks like they're painting the house next to us, and
Okay, so they're upsetting Toby. Well, Toby is officially our mascot for this episode, which we've had mascots before.
yes,
Um, awesome. So it's good timing because I think we can probably, obviously I'll have you back again. There's so much more to talk about. I
yeah,
think this is going to be really helpful for families. I know we're on the same boat and we're heading back to school, which we're going to naturally need to do a measure of detox anyway.
right,
Um, so this is good timing. I will put in the show notes where families can find you. Of course, they can come work with you one-on-one.
yep.
Yeah, so thanks for joining me. I'll be back soon, parents, with more stuff that I wish that I knew sooner and want you to know now. In the meantime, I'll leave you with my latest list of stuff that I've learned the hardest way, or a few things because the list is long. This is the hardest job on the planet. Ask for help, accept it when it's offered. Maybe it's from an expert like yourself. Maybe it's just from a friend who's, further ahead in whatever we're trying to accomplish. But we shouldn't do this by ourselves. And honestly, we really can't. Also, remember, there's no way to be a perfect parent, but there's so many countless ways to be a really good one. And then finally, when we know better, we do better. Do not beat yourself up about the past. Just make a change to do better, differently in the future. That's really all we can do. So thank you for your time, Bill. Thank you for parents and professionals for listening. And we'll be back with more great stuff.
Thanks, Erica.